It is so great.
All right, welcome everybody. Hope you are enjoying yourself in the conference. We have Nathan Cox going to talk about lessons I learned at Aspen. Nathan Cox finds music making deeply meaningful, and he has been soloist, chamber musician, orchestral player, and were in Coburn School at the age of 13. Eventually enrolled at Brigham University with full scholarship at age 16, and he is the lowest string winner of the concerto competition at Aspen Music Festival this past summer, and also attend with full fellowship as well. He's also finalist in the inaugural International Harold Dangi Cello Loan Competition, first place winner of the Brigham and UTASTA competitions, and then two-time winner of the BYU Cello Competition. He teaches cello and piano, and also accompanies his fellow cello students on piano, and enjoys walking and reading. So we're excited to have Dan Cox.
Thanks, Dr. Yu. I wasn't sure what the audience was going to be like, or who I would be talking to. So you all might already know all of the information I'm about to.
And we have some people register online. They
Okay.
so I'm going to record it and they will watch
Great.
it. So you have more audience.
Awesome. Yeah, so I guess I will still share some of those details that you might already know. In addition to just some story stuff. So I went to Aspen this summer and it was really fun, and I love talking about it, and so I get to talk about it now, and that's great. So I applied to, where did I apply? Aspen, Meadowmount, Brevard, and I think two other places. Last summer I went to the Emerald Coast Chamber Music Festival. I don't know if any of you have heard of that. It was a really small festival. There were about 20 people there, 20 students. And that was great because they just, like the teachers there, I wouldn't describe as being like big teachers. They were great. But the cool part was that they brought in tons of, there was like a constant flow. It was only 3 weeks long, but in those 3 weeks, there was a constant flow of guest artists coming in. For the cello, they had Bridget Smith come in, Denise Diokic, I don't know how to pronounce her name, and who else? Forget who else came in for the cello. For the violin, they had Lucy Robert. I still think about her masterclass all the time. Anyway, that was really cool. But it was really different from Aspen, I think, in terms of what I was shooting for. I think basically what I'm getting at is, I think Aspen is a little bit more like, it's a higher level music festival. There are better players there than at the Emerald Coast. And I didn't know if I could shoot that high, I think is what I'm trying to say. So I think that's one interesting point that I would make, is to apply to a range of festivals, because I guess you just never know where you're going to be accepted to. And I certainly didn't think that I was going to get accepted to Aspen, but I did, and it was really fun. Aspen is 8 weeks long, which by the end feels really, really long. It's primarily geared toward the orchestra program, so the orchestra is kind of the main thing. You have weekly lessons, of course, and there's chamber music. There's always a ton of concerts going on. It's just really big. There are over 400 students there. There's an opera program. There's a really big piano program, considering that it's mostly for orchestra. So it's really cool. I was in the Aspen Conducting Academy Orchestra, and when I tell people that, they often think that I was conducting. I was not conducting. We were the guinea pigs for the conducting students, which is a really unique thing that Aspen has. I don't think a lot of other festivals have this, where they have student conductors be able to conduct a real orchestra for the entire time, all 8 weeks. So that was all that we did in that orchestra, is we were the guinea pigs for the conductors. And sometimes it was just reading through lots of repertoire, and sometimes it was, we were on like a week concert cycle, so sometimes our rehearsals were just reading through tons and tons of different repertoire. Sometimes it was preparing for a concert. So we did, it was so fun because we got to do so much big repertoire. We did Beethoven 3, Tchaikovsky 6, Bartok Concerto for Orchestra. We did, what else did we do? There was a ton of new music. We did a Sarajevo piece. We did every concert cycle, so I think we had 7 concerts. Every concert cycle there would be a very, very new piece that was often really complicated and difficult to put together, and there would always be a very big standard masterwork piece as well. So that was really fun. Oh, Brahms 4, we did Brahms 4. That was really fun. Anyway, so the Aspen Conducting Academy Orchestra also accompanied for the concerto competition winners. So they had like the woodwind category, the brass category, piano, violin, low strings. And so I was in the orchestra that also accompanied me for my concerto when I won the concerto competition. So I just thought I would show you a little bit of my performance, because it was that. All right, this is the 7th variation from Tchaikovsky, Rococo Variations. The conductor is one of the student conductors. He was very, very good. He had already conducted this piece twice before, and so it was really easy to put together. It was so fun to work with the conductors because you get to see how like the conductor's mind works, because you don't often see conductors do things in very significantly different ways. But in our rehearsals, we constantly had conducting teachers running up from the back of the room, no, change this, do this drastically differently because what you're doing doesn't work. And so it was so interesting to see the difference between one thing that they would do and then they would change it, and then everyone in the orchestra would look at each other like, oh my gosh, what just happened? We're playing together now. Oh my gosh. It's not our fault. so fun to me because that, did you see my mouse? Yeah, that is Laura Park Chen. Her husband is the concertmaster of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Isn't that insane? My first rehearsal of this piece with the orchestra, Robert Chen, concertmaster of Chicago Symphony Orchestra, comes over to me and he says, "Play loud." And I said, okay. And it was a very interesting experience. You learn just a lot of really random things by going to this sort of thing. Like, she's actually not a very nice person to some people. And then to some people, to me, she was extremely nice. So that's really interesting. Another really interesting thing is that guy, the principal oboist, he's from Juilliard, and you think like, oh, principal oboe of an orchestra at Aspen from Juilliard, they're going to be very like intense and they're not going to make mistakes. They made a lot of mistakes. So it was like, people from Juilliard are human too, and I guess I just never thought about that. Okay, so with that background, here are some things that were interesting. Just going to festivals in general. I wanted to talk about like the importance of just going to festivals in general as an aspiring musician, whether you're going into like orchestra or trying to be a teacher or trying to be a soloist or going into commercial music or conducting or composition, whatever it is, summer festivals, there is almost certainly a summer festival that has a specialization in that thing. I think Aspen had all of those things that I just mentioned except commercial music. So teachers are a super important part of the festival because for me, I was basically using it as, okay, who do I want to study with for grad school? So if you're in high school, you're basically shopping for a teacher for college. If you're in college, you're shopping for a teacher for grad school. If you're just going straight from college to a profession, then you're shopping for mentors, you're shopping for people who can get you connections and networks and things like that to kind of launch you into the field that you want to go into. So it's a great way for you to make a good impression on them, but you're also kind of auditioning them as well. They want to make a good impression on you because they want your money, and that was another thing that I learned at Aspen is that it's all kind of about money. Like when Itzhak came to BYU, that was because we paid him a lot, and a lot of other things, the connections that we have with him. Anyway, it's really important to make friends with really powerful people that can make a lot of difference in your career, and that is, festivals are a great way to do that, because these teachers teach at the top conservatories, and they play in the top orchestras. Principals of really major orchestras go there, and so you get to play side by side with them. You get to take lessons from them, you get to get coached from them in chamber ensembles, and so they can do a lot for you, not only in terms of mentoring you and providing opportunities for you, but also just telling you about how the music industry works. The students are extremely inspiring because they already play at such a high level, and they still practice 4 hours a day because there's always more that you can do, and that was really inspiring to me. And they just play really well. They play really beautifully, and festivals are a great way to meet people that are like you, that love music like you do, and that's awesome. Another really interesting thing about the students is hearing their perspectives on the schools that you might want to go to, on teachers that you might want to study with, on the way that music works in the city that they live in, things like that. Like, yeah, you learn, okay, this cello teacher at this conservatory is really nice, and he's really intense, and he mentors his students. Like, he really spends a lot of time with them, he makes them a priority, but he also swears a lot, so pros and cons there. This orchestra, anyway, oh, yeah, and not just teachers, but also schools. Like, I learned from a few people, cellists who are at Curtis right now. I learned that their cello program doesn't sound that appealing to me, just because of the things that they said about the teachers and how they teach, and how the teachers spend their time with their students. And then shortly after I got back from Aspen, I saw on Slipped Disc that they're hiring 3 new cello professors at Curtis because the other 2 are so busy. Anyway, so it's just really interesting how not just the teachers but also the students are a great resource of knowledge on, okay, this is how this school works, this is how this school works, these are what these teachers are like. Basically just sip a lot of tea semi-constantly. And there are just a lot of people at Aspen, and it's, it would be different at like the Emerald Coast Chamber Music Festival that I went to with 20 people. That one is cool because you get to spend so much time just with a very small group of people, and you get to know people really well, and you get to know the teachers really well. Aspen is cool because there are just so many people to meet, and so many people with so many perspectives, so much knowledge about teachers and schools and music. And some of the students at Aspen are like 35, and they've just been doing this a lot longer than I have. And so it's really nice to learn from them. Another interesting thing about students is kind of hearing about like the Whisper Network. Like, this teacher is not really a good person, and you might want to stay away from them because of the things that they have done. So that's interesting. I think like the music scene in Utah is unfortunately pretty isolated from, like, as opposed to the schools on the East Coast or the West Coast. But going to festivals are a great way to be discovered. And it was, yeah, I decided to do the concerto competition. I think I heard what the repertoire was going to be in about March or April. And so I started preparing, and I had no idea what kind of like competition I was up against. I was thinking, you know, it would be great if I won, and I really do want to win, so I'm going to work really hard, but I have no idea like what kind of players are going to be there, how good they are, and so I just didn't know what to expect. And it turns out that I won, and that was very interesting. That yeah, the runner-up goes to Curtis. There was another guy who he had competed in, wasn't a winner, but he had competed in the Queen Elizabeth competition. And so it was just very interesting the way that things shook up on the concerto competition thing. I think it was mainly because they just hadn't been practicing it for as many months as I had been practicing it, because they didn't care as much about it. But anyway, festivals are a great way to like get yourself out there, get discovered by teachers and students. And if you take it really seriously, then you can really make good impressions and show people what you can do. And learning about how like the music industry works, about like what kinds of opportunities are actually available for you, like how to get a job in an orchestra, or how to like how important is it to get a doctorate? What sorts of professions would require you to get a doctorate? Where are the best schools to get a doctorate from? What are those doctoral programs like? The teachers at festivals know the answers to those questions, and I didn't really know the answers to those questions until I talked to some teachers, and of course, all of that is somewhat subjective, and different teachers might tell you different things, but it's very nice to be at a festival because there's such a wealth of knowledge of how all of these things work for you to access. You can just constantly ask questions, and they probably know the answers, or they can tell you that it doesn't matter. That was another interesting thing that I learned, is that there are lots of different ways to do lots of different things, and sometimes it just doesn't really matter. That was very vague. I don't even know what I was talking about. But anyway, so how to get into a big prestigious festival, or whatever festival you want to. I don't know how important it was that I had a Zoom lesson with one of the teachers that I knew was going to be teaching at Aspen, who would be on the audition committee deciding who got in. I don't know how important it was that I had a Zoom lesson with him in November, but I think it was really important. I'm not totally sure, but I think it's very important to make connections with teachers so that they know how you play, they know how you respond to instruction before they accept you to the festival. So I think it's a really good idea to try and set up some kind of lesson, some kind of Zoom lesson, if you can. Sometimes they don't respond. Very often they don't respond. And sometimes they do, and I think that's really valuable. You guys all know this. Again, I wasn't sure what my audience was going to be like, but you have to know the deadlines of when the audition stuff is due. You can't wait until February or March to say, oh, I need to apply to summer festivals. Because a lot of them are due on like December 1st or January 1st. So you really have to know the deadlines and know what excerpts they're going to require. Oh, sorry. I think you just have to wiggle it, right?
Just use. Keep going.
They're looking pretty good.
Ah.
Yeah, we got it. Yeah, and then work with your teacher to refine a list of what festivals you want to aim for on kind of a spectrum of, this is one that I definitely could get into, this one is like, I probably would get into, but I'm not sure, and this one I almost certainly won't get into, but I might as well shoot my shot. And then work your butt off on the excerpts and the concerto. I think that's probably the most important part, is just make sure that your audition is really, really, really good if you want to get into a really good festival. And that, of course, depends on your goals and what's important to you musically and for your career. Personally, I tend to be rather ambitious in the things that I shoot for, and so that would be my encouragement, is to work your butt off. Something that my teacher at BYU, Dr. Kessler, had me do when I was preparing for these summer festival auditions is get feedback on the excerpts from multiple teachers. And that was a very interesting experience, really valuable experience. It's really nice because so many people have so many different opinions about excerpts, especially excerpts, because there are kind of a limited number of them and everyone knows them. So it's like, everyone has such a specific opinion about how it's supposed to be. So it's helpful to get multiple opinions so that you know what all of the opinions are, and so that you have options to choose from. You can make educated decisions about bowings and articulations, phrasing, and things like that. So that's really important. And at the end of the day, I think, I did it again. Yeah, I think festivals are just a very important opportunity to make connections, get to know people, get to know the music industry, get to know music schools, get to know repertoire, make friends with people, make connections with really important teachers. One really interesting experience that I had was we got to have, well, you could sign up to have lunch with the president of Aspen. The president of Aspen is Alan Fletcher. He was, I believe, the head of the composition department at Juilliard, and then I believe he was also president of NEC. And so that is a very interesting perspective on music and like what music is. And also the music industry and how the music industry works and like what's important if you want to have a career. It's so interesting to have lunch with a guy who just like has dinner with Yo-Yo Ma and Renee Fleming. And he can tell you about them. He can tell you all about his teachers who were, you know, big names in American composition. And that really unique sort of experience, I think, is unique to summer festivals. And I think that is one of my favorite parts about summer festival, is just the wealth of knowledge and expertise that there is for you to mine. The kinds of questions that you can ask and get answers to. I love that about summer festivals. And so, yeah, that's all I have prepared for today about my experience at Aspen. And I hope that it was informative about festivals in general, about Aspen specifically, and yeah, thanks for coming.
We do have time. Do you want to open to some questions or any? Yeah.
I have a question. Do you have any tips on preparing for the recording process specifically?
Yeah, in what ways? Like excerpts or concertos or just general?
Just in general, approaching just the process of recording.
Yeah. Yeah, 1 second. Can I turn this off?
Oh, turn this off? Yeah.
Is it just this big button?
Yeah. Sorry.
This one?
Turn it off.
Okay. Yeah. Like preparing the excerpt or like?
More like preparing, like rather like what do you do different for recording rather
than a performance?
Like live performance.
That's a good question. I'm not sure I do very much differently. I think recordings are weird because the only people that are going to hear it are listening for very specific things. And so you have to be really, really precise, and you can do a lot more takes. So to a certain extent, there's a lot more mercy because you can take, you know, as many takes as you have time for. But on the other hand, there's less mercy because it's a recording, and so they expect it to be a little bit better than a live performance. But I'm not sure that I do very much differently, because I think the things that they would look for in the recording are probably the same that they would look for in a live performance in terms of technique and artistry and like connecting with an audience that isn't even there in terms of your persona. In terms of like when you're actually there in the room recording, I think depending on what you're recording, if it's like a big concerto and you haven't had like a year or more on it, I think it can be helpful to spread the recording over multiple days, because I usually find that if it's like a long piece, I get tired after like 2 takes, you know? And then it starts getting worse rather than better. So I think doing it over like 2 days, and you can have like 4 or 5 takes to choose from, that's really helpful, I think. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that does. Sort of a follow-up question. I find it a little bit difficult to like interact with the like imaginary audience in the recording, like get in the same kind of headspace as a live recording? Do you have any tips for that?
I often, not always, but sometimes I close my eyes when I play, and so that, well, if I'm on stage, I've heard people tell me that that isolates me from the audience, and that's not a good look. But sometimes it's helpful to encourage, like, imagining that someone is there who is not.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think more like connecting with an audience is more about how engaged your body language looks in the music. So I think it's just about how engaged you look in the music, and that is different depending on who you are.
Yeah.
So if you're Starker, you're just never going to look very engaged. And that's okay. So, yeah. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Any other question? I have a half question, half addition to it, because I was in Aspen too, just 20 years before you guys. And one other thing that I enjoyed there also is like you can actually get a bike. At that time, you can give me for free for the few weeks there. And then I hike with other people. Like it's imagining hiking with teachers or some really famous people like there's some famous quartet or other students in the beautiful places. Have you?
We've been hiking.
Yeah.
Yes.
We did that. Yeah. And
but
also,
not at Aspen.
not at Aspen, but here too, right? So like how and of course the food, it's you go to different places and stuff. How you how that makes a special experience for you, like besides playing music and friendship and does that music make you enjoy what you do more or less?
Yeah, I think Aspen definitely leans heavily into like we are kind of in one of the most beautiful areas of the world there is, and so we're going to use that as an inspiration in like the architecture of the campus, so that there are lots of windows opening out to the canyon that you're in. And yeah, there were bikes. You can bike all over Aspen, and it's extremely beautiful. There's really easy access to lots of extremely beautiful hikes you can go on with like other amazing musicians. And the hikes are just gorgeous. Like, I don't think I've ever actually cried because a landscape was so beautiful until then. It was just amazing. Yeah, it's definitely very inspiring, and I think quite a few festivals try to do that, to kind of help you connect with the natural environment and using the specific location that the festival is in to inspire you to be a better musician, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Great.
I do have a question. So when you were preparing for the concerto competition, was the Rococo variation, was that the only thing, or was there a list from which you could choose?
There was one thing. So for violists, it was, what was it for violists? Stamitz. For bassists, it was Von Hall. And for cello, it was Tchaikovsky. For violinists, Sibelius. For piano, Grieg. So it was a very
Just
set
one
list of one
okay.
thing.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And another question that I have, because I feel like you would learn so much by being in the orchestra that you were with, because you were able to see all of these different people conducting who were probably very good, but also still learning. Did that change your perspective of, first of all, orchestra playing, and second of all, did you in the back of your mind say, oh, maybe I should be a conductor?
Definitely yes to the latter. It made me very interested in how this all works. And it was really interesting to see also how important like the connection, the personal connection is between the conductor and the orchestra, like how they work together, not just how they conduct, but like if they seem standoffish or if they talk too much, things like that. It's just really interesting how it has a very subtle but very powerful effect, how the conductor works with the orchestra. The best conductor, the conductor that I enjoyed working with the most, seemed to have the best technique, the best connection with the orchestra, was an 18-year-old
Wow.
from Israel. He is just starting his bachelor's degree in Berlin
That's
this
so
year.
cool.
And yeah, that's really amazing. What was the first question?
Well, did it change your perspective as an orchestral musician of seeing the various techniques and variety between the different conductors?
Like, in the BYU Philharmonic, Corey had talked a lot about how he really leaned into the whole "I'm unnecessary, you do the counting" sort of thing. But it really did emphasize that the conductor does really have a lot to do with keeping the ensemble together. Not just in terms of keeping the beat, but how they move from one beat to the other. What, like, very small risk things, very small things about, you know, is there a click, is there no click, is there, like, are they showing you the space between the beat, or are they going there very, like, spaces between beats became very important, and that was really interesting to learn about. I think there's also a degree to which, like, an orchestra would probably just get used to a conductor, and the way that that conductor conducts, which is not what we had the opportunity to do at all, since there were so many students.
They had to adapt
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah. So, that was interesting, because they very rarely talked to us. They very rarely told us, you need to count better, or your dotted rhythms are turning into triplets. It was usually talking to the conductor, telling the conductor, the orchestra's not together in this spot. You can fix that with this very specific movement. That was super interesting. Yeah.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah.
I know you talked a little bit about how you chose what festivals to apply for, but on the other end of that, how do you choose once you got back, acceptances, how did you choose which one to go to?
That's a really good question. A lot of it was like how much like financial aid there was. So I got accepted to Brevard. I think I got a scholarship. I got accepted to Chautauqua. That's automatically free. I got accepted to Meadowmount, but with about a 3/4 or half scholarship. I did not get accepted to Heifetz, and then I got accepted to Aspen with a fellowship, which means full tuition and also full housing. So it kind of looked like I have 3 full rides. One, like, I would have really liked to go to Meadowmount, and I was kind of leaning towards Meadowmount. But they also didn't send me the acceptance letter before Aspen's acceptance deadline for me to say that I accept their acceptance. What word am I looking for? Yeah,
Yeah.
It didn't
Yes.
overlap well enough, so that's another factor, is sometimes they're just not gonna get back to you soon enough. So then it became, out of these 3, which one, like, is the most prestigious, because they're all gonna cost the same. And it also ended up being more cost effective to go to Aspen because I could carpool with Gabe. Gabe is a horn player at BYU who also went to Aspen. So that was really nice. So I didn't have to pay for airfare as well. But that's another thing, is that BYU offered to cover my airfare with experiential learning. So I don't know how other institutions do that, but I think a lot of institutions do have that sort of fund available to help musicians go to festivals.
Great.
Any other questions?
Awesome. Well, that's such a great presentation, and
Thank you.
we look forward to to learn a lot more from you and how things after Aspen. And,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you very much for your
Thank you.
session.
Thank you.